Well, again, thank you for sticking around after the movie. Again, I'm Jason Dick. I'm the editor-in-chief of Roll Call, and this is my colleague at Fiscal Note, Bill Frischling, our vice president of emerging technology at Fiscal Note. Bill, thank you for sharing some of your thoughts about the movie.
Anytime I can nerd out, I'm good.
We're in the right place. Before we get into some of the themes, I did want to talk just a little bit about some of the form of the movie. We did not show After Yang at the Avalon when it came out in 2021, but Kokonada's previous feature, Columbus, was here in 2014, I think it was, Andy, 2014 or 15. It was a while back. And again, if you have not seen this movie, I highly recommend it, particularly if you love modernist architecture, because it is set and filmed entirely in Columbus, Indiana, which is the home of quite a bit of the country's, some of the most iconic modernist architecture. And it is very much like this film. It's very quiet. It's about family, and it's about architecture. It's quite good. But I also wanted to mention some of the other films that in his filmography, which they show up quite a bit in the in a lot of the cinematography. He's done a lot of video. He's done a lot of shorts and video essays, and some of them have titles like Eyes of Hitchcock, Mirrors of Bergman, Godard in Fragments, Way of Ozu, Linklater on Cinema and Time, and The Hands of Bresson. So his influences are right there in front of us, if we care to see it. And one of the things that I love about movies like this is that you can talk about the form, you can talk about the content, and it's a very rich vein. But let's get into some of the science here and some of the themes with Bill. When Bill and I work together, Fiscal Note is the owner of CQ and Roll Call. Bill came into it from his companies, Fact Squared and Fact Base. I came into it from CQ and Roll Call. Now we have the same corporate overlord. But we like to nerd out quite a bit. And so just want to give a quick intro of yourself, Bill, and then we can get into the movie.
Sure. So just super fast, I've been working on the internet for about 30 years. I got started all the way back in late 1994, which tells you our last millennium. Mostly I focus on building products. My end is usually more on the let's just find cool things to do and see how they work out. Founded 4 companies, and like most people who have, nerds with short attention spans, when something's interesting, I just kind of run with it and see where it goes until I'm bored with it. I'm still not bored with what we're doing with AI, and I've been mostly focused there for about 10 years and trying to see what it can do, what it can't do, and basically I usually describe it as, I pick it up, see what size hole it makes in the wall, and see if I have a need for that size hole, so to speak.
I mean, one of the things that we've talked about a little bit is, there's no shortage of AI movies, as Andy and Bill and I were talking about when we picked this film. There's Blade Runner, there's AI.
Well, I was about to say, it wasn't trying to kill anybody in this movie, which makes it a little unusual.
It is. But there's something about this film where, we don't know when exactly this is set, but it feels close. It feels very close.
No argument. One of the things I thought was interesting was I like movies that, well, obviously I like technology, but when the text there is just part of the scenery versus the actual point of it, like, while I have nowhere near the cinema vocabulary that you do, or probably most people in this room, but in my view, the story, yes, it was about AI, but of course it had nothing to do with AI and what it's talking about. Its existence and what it means. And I think I mentioned to you before when I'd seen this for the first time, what was fascinating to me is just the duality of, duality, that sounds pretentious, but the duality of, all right, Yang was a person in everybody's eyes, but Yang was a property that people were bidding on at the same time, and with absolutely no disconnect really between those two existing.
He belongs to us, I think, terms like that you hear over and over.
Exactly. Yeah. How much do you want for him, even from somebody who was into it? He was in love with somebody? How fascinating to study. Yeah. So that, at least for me, that's what I latched into, because it's always interesting when people, I think you used the example of basically like a pet, like, your pet's not a person, but look at little Pookie over there who wants to do. even though mentally you're talking to a dog who's like, can I eat you yet?
Right. Yeah. And I think that is the thing that where it does feel so close, because one of the things that we did when we first started, we're talking about this, is you asked one of your AI friends about what they thought about After Yang.
Well, I don't know about friends, kind of like a cat. I'm pretty sure it's plotting against me, but, hang on. Hey, Margaret, I'm at an event right now, and I was curious if you could please look up the information you have about the film After Yang from 2021, and just give us your opinion about what it says about artificial intelligence and humanity.
After Yang is a 2021 science fiction film directed by Kogonada, based on the short story Saying Goodbye to Yang by Alexander Weinstein. The film explores themes of artificial intelligence and humanity through the story of a family coping with the malfunction of their AI helper, Yang. In After Yang, the AI character Yang serves not just as a helper, but...
Sorry, Margaret, to interrupt you, but I'd like your opinion on it, please. You got the idea. Sorry, Margaret's being the connection's a little pokey in here, and the funny part is that's not even everything I built. That's literally, you could download ChatGPT and have a conversation with it like that. And it is, for all of the talk and for all of the buzz, it's a cul-de-sac. There's no intelligence. There's just a couple of trillion calculations going on all at the same time, and it just happens to sound like a person. But, I mean, that's where we are now, but it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see there's a lot of focus on trying to get there. I don't think this is it, but it's going to be something. It's going to come along.
I was struck about a week ago, there was a New York Times column by Kevin Roos, who's their technology columnist and also the host of their Hard Fork podcast. And he spent a month creating and talking to AI friends. And so, and he gave them different personalities and different traits. And one was like the kind of bro-y training guy that would help, kind of motivate him to go work out. Another was sort of a older, almost sort of shrink-like, like would give him life advice. And another was sort of a manic pixie girl type, that he could flirt with the permission of his wife, he said. And it was interesting how, this, I encourage all to read this column, because he said that a lot of the same things. This is sort of a cul-de-sac. You get like a lot of predictable answers. But then on some of the advice, it was actually turned out to be better than some of the stuff that he was getting from his real friends, which is, again, the thing where you think like, oh, this is getting into close to the uncanny valley, right?
It's absolutely, in terms of the uncanny valley, I mean, this is way beyond the uncanny valley. This isn't okay, I'm watching Tom Hanks on the screen on a train or anything like that. Like, it's way beyond. I've been working with this particular type of technology now for coming up on about 3 years. And on the list of folks where I just want to say to anybody, if you're ever complaining about what your spouse does in the car, I have middle-aged man conversations with you. Oh, interesting, about the Crimean War. Could you go into the causes? And I'm having a conversation as my wife's sitting there going like, seriously, I married you? But it's also useful in the sense of now I drive in my routine as I have conversations. What's on my schedule? Could you please email so-and-so and do this? Put this draft in there. I really hate PowerPoint. Could you write this up into 3 slides and leave it for me in Google Slides and I'll take a look at it? And I get done all my scut work basically on the drive in. And it's incredibly useful. I don't even think about it as uncanny valley anymore, and neither do most people, but it's kind of like, it was amazing when Alexa came out, and we all remember like, okay, it was supposed to be something and it's not, but I'm one of those annoying people. I walk into a room, Alexa, turn on the lights, please. Alexa, could you please, turn it off to the stereo? I don't even think about it anymore. It's just reflexive. And ultimately, I think this is where it's, I don't know if there's anybody in the room who could remember back when you could search the internet and not find anything that you were looking for except pornography, and then suddenly Google showed up and it was the revelation of, I could look for anything and actually find what I'm looking for. This is the same thing, and we're going to be unpacking it for years, but on the uncanny valley, it's kind of like the introduction. It's like how it's going to manifest itself. There'll be the hype machine that's already in full swing. There'll be the people who think it's a complete load of BS. And this is closer to magic than anything I've seen, but that's different than actual magic or actual intelligence.
So it seems like what's so interesting about a film like this and where it feels like we're close to it is that we may be close, but we're still a ways away, and we don't know exactly how we get there, right?
Exactly. Where you were saying, like the Friends, and I think I'd mentioned to you, if you go back historically, I believe it was in the late 50s, there was a program called Eliza that's been showing up, and all Eliza would basically do, and it was a very small program, and you'd say, Eliza, I'm not feeling good. Interesting. Why do you think that is? All it would do is just keep repeating questions, but it felt so real, and what they found when they studied it is people were engaging with it like a person, and back to that, we know it's not a person, but people would keep coming back. Eliza, this was a really bad day. What should I do? I don't know. What do you think you should do? And it was totally normal. And this is going back 60, 70 years. So, I mean, the behavior patterns are there. This, of course, is adding the obvious of, the non-Elon Musk built robot body on top of it that looked totally real. But even that, I mean, my kids, one thing that still always blows my mind is they have no concept of distance. They have friends when we go up to see family in New York who didn't realize they didn't live in New York up until they were teenagers because they'd get together online, they'd play video games, they'd talk. And find the concept of long distance charges by minute as like, were you banging your rocks together to communicate while you were doing that? It was like, how could it cost $40 to make a phone? Again, all the things I'm sure everybody's been through. And it's that kind of like these kind of changes and watching them happen, and sometimes it's like where it's going is going to be simple, but a certain part of the script is predictable.
One thing that I also really like about this movie is this whole idea of technological deprecation, where we don't know. I mean, like machines fail, just like bodies fail.
Yeah.
And you never know when. It'll probably happen at an inconvenient time.
Always does.
If like your Wi-Fi will go down right before an important meeting.
Unplug Yang, count to 5, plug back in. Yeah.
Right. And that just doesn't seem like that seems like such a rich vein for where we're at too, because we just like so many people's. It's like the William Gibson quote: "The future's already here. It's just unevenly distributed." Like we seem to be very like confident that everything works, except it doesn't.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's the amount of flooding. It's like, I would guess you consider yourself a well-read person on the news or whatever else, but how often does somebody suggest an article where you're like, I didn't see it? The entire world's out there. It's impossible to keep up on all of it. And in a lot of ways, it's the same thing with technology. It's just finding people. I spend probably, it's safe to say, far too much time playing around with this kind of stuff. Find out from talking to friends, talking to people at work, talking to my mom. That's my favorite one. She's like, I never heard, oh, of course you know about this. I never heard about this. Thanks for telling me. Let me go check this out and see what it is. The weird part is we say like the deprecation technology. The one thing I latched into here, which I want to be clear, was obviously not the point of the movie. Back to nerd is when the reveal of how old Yang is. I'm like, nobody would keep around a computer for 80 years. It would always be some kind of an upgrade. But of course, I want to be clear. I know that's the wrong interpretation in quotes, but that was a piece that I rat-holed on when I saw it for the first time. It's like, there'd be something better. They would have switched it out. But of course, the answer is, there's a lot of technology we use that's been around for decades that we don't even think about because, it works. Who cares? Yeah, it'd be great to talk to my microwave. I don't need to have a conversation with my microwave. I'm good with it.
A dumb microwave is just fine.
Right, I'm good with pushing the button.
Did you see it coming, or how did you react to the sort of the clone curveball, like where we realize we're not just talking about like implications in ethics and issues surrounding artificial intelligence and our relationship to it, but also to clones.
And clearly the implication that I always screw up Colin Farrell, because I was going to say the wrong Colin last name. Clearly the neighbors thought he had a thing against clones and was clearly a clone and whatever else. So honestly, in terms of that, I think like the main issue, there was a study, like right after Alexa came out, and what they found was, and I'm one of those people, usually when I talk, I'm courteous. Alexa, turn on the lights, please. What's the point in saying please? I'm talking to a toaster with a voice box. But when they did the study, what they found was people who stopped being polite started being rude to other people. They intellectually knew they were talking to a speaker. They knew they were talking to people, but suddenly they stopped saying please and thank you. And so I always make a point of doing that, even though, it's kind of like, yes, I realize this Alexa's care, just like, the bot on the phone is not named Margaret, it's just called GPT. But when I worked with technology and started developing it, I just started calling it Margaret from a West Wing reference, and I've just kept it going. So when I think of these like smart bots, I think of them as Margaret. So it was natural for me to say that. On a completely emotional level, it makes sense to me. On an intellectual level, it's back to I could say, yo, stupid, and it would make no difference in how it responded. But apparently it does have an effect, and yet it's those kind of ripple effects on how people interact with tech.
And we were raised better than to do so.
We were raised much better than to do that. And again, I do, things that I won't necessarily shout from the rooftops, but I'll pay attention when my car is driving, but I'm now used to my car driving me to New York, basically, and I'll keep my eyes up, and there'll be something playing on the side, so I don't look down. My eyes are on the road, but I can't picture going back to my car not driving me up to New York, so to speak, because I hate driving.
You're a Star Trek nerd.
What gave it away?
I couldn't help but think of Data when Yang is going through some of his prompts, when he's talking about, well, that's really not really my programming, but then he kind of goes into a little bit of a philosophical thing.
And then cuts himself off.
Right.
I don't really know. I lost my train of thought.
Right.
I don't remember. Really?
And the whole, as Data evolves throughout Star Trek Next Generation, the television show, and particularly the movies, Data is there to remind people what it means to be human as he develops into being a human.
Wizard of Oz, all of these things back in parallel. HAL 9000, my personal favorite. Again, you know this, but nobody will be surprised that my voice for some of my home stuff is, "What are you doing, Bill?" And, mostly to freak my wife. I actually changed my mom's Amazon to do that once. It freaked her out. That was a lot of fun, though. It's those kinds of, what actually, when I think about it in terms of Data, what's interesting is, think about how advanced Data seemed 30 years ago. Data doesn't hold a candle to this. And even just our perception of what we consider to be futuristic, or again, nerd things people notice. Cool, the Millennium Falcons, mixing up, parsecs as units of measure or units of time. But meanwhile, they're doing this little green screen box that's doing it like they couldn't figure out displays if they have all these spaceships. But that's only through the lens of where we are now versus where we were at the time. Just like HAL 9000 looked amazing. And, I think when I looked it up, it was a cardboard box and a camera lens that was shot in a particular way. But didn't make a difference. It was this amazing thing. And suddenly HAL 9000 seems, well, not the murder part, but terrifyingly realistic. Well, hopefully not the murder part.
HAL may have poisoned the well for AI now, where we have so many people concerned about where this is leading and whether there might be a threat. Again,
every conversation I have that usually starts with Skynet is in the first three,
right,
back and forth with people, and that's a perfectly fair analogy.
So where do you see us advancing in the next year or so? Because it feels like we're still in the beginning of something that we saw begin with ChatGPT in 2022.
So just getting into pure opinion, because, well, who really cares? You know what I mean. You think about, there was these AT&T commercials in the early 90s, you will. And I remember, if you look them up, they're on YouTube. And it's one of those things where, other than the fact that, of course, AT&T had nothing to do with any of them, what do you have, what do you walk into a hotel, what do you have on TV? We have every television show and movie ever made ever. How is this possible? You renew your driver's license at a machine. All of these things, you could see it, but the technology wasn't there. Where I'm going with this is Google was a revelation. Again, back to things you and I know, maybe some people in the audience, explain to your children the concept of a library when you wanted to find pieces of information. And it's back to these stones. You had to go there, you had to look something up in a card, you then had to go and find it, you then had to open the book, look at an index, and they're like, I'd just rather be stupid. It's like, I love you too, kids, thank you. And suddenly, you could go to your computer and look up anything and have it immediately. It's something we take for granted now, but we've been through the life where that wasn't the case. It took a while to digest what actually it means. If you had gone back, it's the tyranny of choice. If you had gone back and asked somebody, you could have anything in the world, it's in your pocket, have it instantly, what would you do? 25 years ago, would your answer have been cute puppy videos and people screaming at each other? Now, of course, it's more than that, but who knows? In other words, some good, like everything else, some good, some bad. We're in that phase right now, which is, there's all this potential, but what's going to click? And that's an honest answer. My own opinion is, when I saw this from the beginning, it's when you'll be able to talk to it. Everybody under 35 is like, why? You could thumb type it. I'm like, yeah, if I thumb type more than a sentence, I'm calling somebody or getting to a keyboard. I don't want to do that. That's my generation. I'd rather talk to it. Is that going to be the right answer? I personally think so. I could be wrong. But the whole implication of what it can do, oh my God, it's coming for my jobs. No, it's not. It's coming for some jobs. If your jobs involve doing the same thing over and over and over again without thinking, you should be very nervous. If you have to think in your job, you really have nothing to worry about on this phase, in my own opinion. But what it means, we're going to be shaking it out for at least the next half decade, even if it were to freeze right here, because there's so much we can do. But what is it that's going to click with everybody and go, oh my God? For me, it was taking care of my scut work in the car. It's using the time because do I really want to look at traffic cones on the GW Parkway? Not really.
I think we should open up to the audience. What do you think? Questions or comments or observations about Brisson?
Or yelling at Jason for inviting me. I mean, really, that's okay.
Yeah, please use the microphone.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. What is why don't we know what the wife's occupation is? Kira, I guess her name is. And the fact that we don't made me wonder if she was on the same moral plane as her tea-obsessed husband. So I wondered, why that aesthetic choice in the movie? And is she possibly related to anything more sinister? Does she work for the dark side of something?
That's a great question. I assumed because of some of the ways she's talking about I've got a presentation, her husband Jake calls her and, she's not available and she has to spend the night, at work, which is a little weird, although
I was about to say for normal, for nerds.
But we're journalists, Bill.
So what do you think might be her?
I think she's some kind of like McKinsey type consultant. Is my that's just my gut feeling.
But you think she's a fellow human with this adopted child from China, and she's okay emotionally and morally?
Seems like it. She doesn't seem like a bad actor to me.
I'm not a cinephile, but I didn't get, my takeaway was looking at, we were talking, I watched this movie and going like, okay, I'm just feeling bad that I didn't spend more time with my kids when they were growing up, was my takeaway from it. Like,
right.
Okay.
I mean, I will say that there are weird little hints that she could be a robot herself. I mean, she doesn't eat the ramen when, when they have the ramen thing. I mean, there's just like small little, yeah.
But isn't that kind of the point?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, next. What is the society that is controlling this world that the people are living in, that determines that they can or can't fix the replicants or the robots?
Techno-sapiens. Yes.
Yes.
Right to repair.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's almost purposefully mysterious so that you're a little on edge because everything seems great. I mean, they're like you pointed out, they can grow grass in their cars. It's so pleasant and nice. But the repair shop guy, who's one of your favorite characters.
New York, I was reading into it on Woodbury, so I'm like, okay, this is real familiar to me here.
I mean, there is something overlappingly sinister about this, and the Museum of Technology seems like this nice kosher place.
But they're bidding basically, how much money can I give you for this?
Right. Mm-hmm. So it does seem like this is. Again, maybe this is why it feels so familiar because on one hand, you've got this really nice society where, people can seem to operate boutique, bespoke tea shops at a loss indefinitely.
And not show up for days.
But then also like people just disappear, like the mechanic, Russ is the mechanic's friend, he's like, they got him, and he is banging his like wrench and so forth.
Well, and related to that, what happens when they put on the glasses and they have access, is this what it is, to the past of Yang and then related to that, the fact that the movie mixes what seem to be replicants or robots with cloned people. And is that woman a clone of her great-grandmother?
That seemed to be the implication, because in his memory, you saw her, and then you saw the memorial by the side of the road, and they said she was a clone. So
Yeah, and Ada at one point says, that was my great aunt. So yeah, it does seem to be a succession.
And the next door neighbor is married to a clone?
I don't know. I didn't actually
that
see a
was his daughter.
spouse. I think those are 3 daughters, 2 twins and a teenager.
Oh, I see. That's a daughter.
Yeah, and he even says, like that. I missed it the very first time I saw it, the movie, and it becomes clearer, as you find out that they're clones later, is that he says his daughters are clones. And the very first time
Because there was such an age gap between the older one.
Yeah, the bias, I think, of just being in this time is that when the very first time I heard it, I heard his daughters have phones.
So do you think this is a kind of a dystopian vision?
Yes, to be honest, yes and no. But like, for example, you're saying like the repair and the sinister. If you have a Tesla, you have to go to Tesla. Nobody can crack it open. If you had an iPhone up until recently, Apple could repair it, or you could go to a third-party shop without warranty. John Deere's my favorite one, where it's like you have to buy your $1,500 part, but it costs $5. Well, too bad. We'll literally brick your $100,000 tractor from orbit if you don't do it. These are the kinds of things and by the way, none of these are made-up examples. These are things that exist now, and it's a whole right to repair. But again, to be clear, not being a cinephile and being more from the nerd view, when I heard like, oh, you can't crack it open and repair it and it's illegal, I'm like, yep, heard that story before.
Thank you very much.
How long do you think it'll be before Yang could be played by a robot instead of an actor?
You've seen some of the videos that I've put together. You tell me.
It won't be that long, I don't think.
I've been doing, I jokingly sometimes at work have done presentations where, and it's using off-the-shelf stuff. It has a picture of me. I type in what I want it to do. It generates my voice. It generates my face. And I just play it on the presentation. Now, part of my job is making a point about emerging technologies and showing people what the potential is. But right now, it's pretty clear, obviously, that it's not me, but most of that is just the motion isn't natural. The face, the lips moving, the voice. I played it for one of these things for my mom and my spouse a year ago, and I'm like, basically like, which one's me, which one's not me? And they both had the same reaction, which is, who cares? But they couldn't tell the difference.
Do you think we'll ever see the day when a robot gets an Academy Award for the best supporting actor in a movie?
I guarantee they would pull the award before they probably did.
Right.
It would be my
and
guess.
this was a big part of what the strike was about with the Actors Guild. It was intellectual property rights over AI likenesses. I mean, and this has come up this week, because Scarlett Johansson has said, like, you used my voice illegally,
and
for
OpenAI said no. And let's be clear, I love OpenAI. He's like, come on.
Yeah, she has a very distinct husky voice.
Right.
Now, back to AI itself. AI, as I understand it, can only boil down data that from the past. Is there any possibility that AI could predict a paradigm shift? I mean, is there any possibility that AI could have predicted Google? I mean, Google is a paradigm shift. I mean, before Google, we never had it. It's a paradigm shift. Is there anything, and is there any future paradigm shift that AI could actually predict?
So all of this stating the obvious, all of this opinion versus like definitively. One is the amount of time until we get up to that point. I guarantee whatever amount of time I'd predicted would be wrong, but I think being able to do that kind of stuff is probably already here, and it's a matter of somebody just coming up with the right combination to do it. AI can actually generate unique things, and it does it all the time. Essentially like people, it learns from the information it has. There was a famous nerdy example from, I think it was 2014, 2015, where Microsoft in all of their brilliance said, we're going to release this AI chatbot and put it on Twitter, and it's going to learn from people talking to it. Does anyone want to guess what happened to that chatbot inside of 6 hours? Racist, homophobic, ageist, whatever, go back to the kitchen. I can't believe, wow, Hitler was right. I mean, I'm not kidding. Within 6 hours, this is what it learned from Twitter. Now, to be clear, it did its job. It learned from the people talking to it. So they are capable of learning and riffing and doing these things and have been for a while. But there's a difference between that and intelligence. When all of my children learned to walk, they didn't learn to walk by first ingesting the entire corpus of information in the entire world to figure out how to put one foot in front of the other. They figured out how to do it. How did they do it? Well, if we knew that, we'd be training folks. But right now, what this is a brute force approach. It's cheap enough, in quotes, because it's still tens of millions of dollars, to put these kinds of things together, and they're very useful, but they're still real intelligence. They're not that, but they can figure out and find these kinds of patterns.
Thank you. Thank you for, doing those events, and we really love the theater, and this is the first one when I see the science on screen, so which is wonderful. There was another book called Clara and the Sun. I don't know if you know it. It's very similar in its spirit. And see, some people know. And I forgot the name of the writer, and I didn't want to Google it. But it's very similar. And so poses the same questions. So this is probably, I hate to say it wasn't original. It's not about originality. I'm not trying to be smarter than the movie, but the questions were posed already. But what's interesting is that, and I actually didn't want to look for the author. There's an Italian author which wrote a book, 6 Cities, and it was translated in Russian and Spanish, not in English. And it actually, in the 70s, painted a picture of future. And I don't want to give it away because you'll probably be curious to read it. And now you can read it very quickly, very easily. You can click the button and translation will be available. It's not available in English, but I have it in Russian. But it painted the future, actually, very accurately that way, and it was in the 70s, very nicely laid out. But my question is, so there is another book, which when ChatGPT came out, it was immediately profiled, and what is by Kurt Vonnegut, They Play a Piano. And I think that's a very, very important book, and we're all in different stages of life and different parts of the society. You belong kind of to the technocrats, and I don't mean it negatively. I belong to people who create technology. And what Kurt Vonnegut basically described is a society where the middle was pulled out, and everything bad that happens. He does the tea, she does butterflies, and they seem to be happy. I'm kind of wondering why they're not having a revolution, but that's another story.
And then you see the guy in the shop who very clearly is not on the same level. Yeah,
you can't really continue this. But the question is, for those of us who have minor children, and, fortunately, unfortunately, but we do, and we have minor and bigger children. So there is a huge, I would say the academia is in a state of, I would say, rapid search for what they should do. And so how do you actually, and I'm not looking for the answer, but I'm just looking for the ad hoc thoughts. And I don't mean study math, don't study math, study liberal arts, don't study liberal arts. It's really more a combination of what people study, how they become, how they evolve in the age of where some of the mental work will be done by them, by somebody. And how do you actually, what are the skills you think, personally, what are the skills that should be developed when things are changing so rapidly? And the example I give, as you could probably see, every business school now has an AI class. You go there, in 6 months we'll teach you. Now, today's May. If I sign up for the class in July, by the time they actually start doing the class, the AI landscape will be different. So it's obsolete as we speak. So how do you actually educate people at a time where catching up with thought and technology and the impact on society becomes almost humanly impossible?
Oh, sure, you're going to look at me on that one. No.
I'm happy to chime in, but I'm curious what you think first before I weigh in.
So 2 things. One is the things in the current state of technology now, they can fake being creative, so to speak. And it's not even fake. There is some creative things that I've seen. But there's a difference between, and not saying this in any way derogatorily towards any of my children, but, my 6-year-old was also creative. I wouldn't go found a company based on what my 6-year-old was creatively telling me, but it was still, some interesting ideas. I've always been a big fan of critical thinking. I've always been in the school of, like if you're working with, smart folks who are just out of school, you can teach them just about anything, but you can't teach them to think. That's my own personal philosophy. Whether that's the answer in this scenario, whether that's going to be obsolete quickly, I honestly don't know. I mean, I don't mind the rapid change, but it certainly is happening a lot. I mean, I went from working on something to where my mom was telling me about it, so to speak, like less than 6 months later. And let's just say my mom doesn't normally update me on new technology developments. And so that was a little bit of a change.
The talking microwave?
Yeah, bingo. Not so much talking about, but she'll be like, I figured out how to do this on Alexa. I'm like, I didn't know this existed. But in terms of these kind of changes, even though it's never a perfect example, the old terrible axiom, history always repeats except when it doesn't. We've been through this where, a pocket calculator. Should you be allowed to have a pocket calculator in class? Do you need to learn how to type? And we could keep regressing back. To your point, happen nowhere near as fast as it's happening now. But there have been these kind of changes. There's a mini class that I do every year at my kids' high school. And I call it like computer archaeology, which is like, okay, you think something's new, let's go back and understand where it came from. And I'm like, there were more than 500,000 people in the US that had a job called computer. They don't exist anymore. But their job was basically doing long division and slide rulers. Those jobs disappeared. Were they replaced by other better jobs? Basically, history says, there were other jobs. The unemployment didn't spike. Whether it's better or not is subjective, but there's cycles we can look at. I've gone through this with my kids in Excel, where they're like, I don't need to learn that. Excel will just tell me what the answer is. Yeah, but it's kind of useful to know how to do it yourself as well. But my mom will tell me it's kind of useful to know how to write cursive. And I was like, why the hell would I want to learn to write cursive? I don't know. It's a long way of saying I don't have an answer, but at least there's parallels to see where these kind of changes in technology come, albeit nowhere near this fast.
And I would say, to give you a little idea of my background too, like I previously was a teacher before I got into journalism. I taught at the university level and the high school level, and I've actually both studied and taught Vonnegut and several of his novels. And what I keep coming back to with Vonnegut, the reason I keep reading him, the reason I like to talk about him, and I'm glad you brought up Player Piano, is that everything that Vonnegut writes is usually geared towards reminding people or telling them what it means to be human. And I think that is ultimately got to be the focus of not just a liberal arts education, like our son who just graduated with his philosophy degree on Sunday from Hamilton College, but a business school or an engineering school. Like all of these things we're doing are in the service of humanity and for human causes. And that as long as we keep that in mind, as long as we continue to learn how to think critically and keep like our foot, so to speak, on the ground of like where we exist with our fellow humans, that's where I think the academy and the education system can deliver for us to remind us what it is, to why we are humans, what we're doing here as humans.
The critical thinking, although it can be trained, but at some point it's I would say, imperfection of the mind. Some people are born to be critical thinkers, others are not. You can adjust it somewhat. There is a deviation. But other than that, if a person is not born this way, you can kill yourself as a teacher. Read all the Vonnegut novels, and you will still not be able to think. The idea is that you're going to think outside of the pattern and find a new pattern. That is basically what you did. And that's a gift. So we can be only stimulated and worked on. But in terms of the society, a lot of people want to compare this to Industrial Revolution, which had a lot of labor substitution. But the difference between now and then was that there was a lot of unmet needs, and society needed a lot. Today, we are very much in the industrialized world at the peak of our consumption. I don't know if you can consume more. I don't think we can. And we do consume. So, and therefore, some people will be following Kurt Vonnegut's prediction of being on the other side of the river. And and we all want our children, hopefully not to be, what is it, RICs and RACs. And so that's why the question, and it's a huge challenge. If you look at universities, obviously they are losing their minds over it. But now the private high schools with money, they are trying to do the same thing. Is they're going to funnel people to the universities, hopefully do something other than protesting. Sorry.
If you don't mind me asking, what was the name of the book? Was it Six C's?
6 cities.
Six cities.
I will talk to you and I'll give it to you. I'll find the book and you can take a picture of it.
Okay, thank you.
And,
I was just curious because I didn't
and it's a brilliant book, and it's written by an Italian writer, obviously with a somewhat socialist communist agenda. Normally, he's Italian, and he talks a lot about some bad things in society. Each story is about one thing, and it's amazing how relevant it is to today. It's just like almost scary. So. But I will
always
get it for
curious.
you.
Yeah, I
I'll get
appreciate it.
for
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
I think that'll do for the night. Thank you so much for coming, for watching the film, for hanging out and partaking in the discussion. Bill, thank you so much. For being a part of this. This has been
Thanks
great.
for inviting me. I don't mind talking.
And thank you to the Avalon and Science on Screen.